It's not the load that breaks you down, but it's the way that you carry it. The load that falls on the shoulders of so many young men is often unseen, forcing them to hide it in silence. This load builds up and in turn, breaking them down. As many of you know, on February 13th, 2025, there was a car accident involving 3 students from Holland Hall. What you might not have known is that one of the students that tragically passed away was one of my close friends, Claire Esmond. Immediately, my phone started blowing up with text messages, calls, teachers allowing me to do extensions, allowing me to miss school, and the emotions I was feeling were finally validated. This was something really weird for me. All the weight that had been on my back before the accident was just supposed to be as if it wasn't there. All the weight that was on my back after the accident was slowly being taken off by people supporting me. But what about the weight that was already there? Why couldn't I express the weight that was already there? Why did I have to keep it on my back? This year, the theme is unseen, and I immediately knew what I wanted to talk about. In 2022, men committed suicide at a rate 4% more than women. And although they make up 50% of the population, they account for 80% of the suicides. This should be alarming to you. Through my research, I started with Google, and I just did a little Google search, and I decided to try to find any information about mental health, men's mental health, and in general. Mental health had an abundance of resources. I was able to find a ton of information about mental health, but once I started looking into men's mental health, it came up dry. I wasn't able to find any information on mental health, or men's mental health, and I thought Google was supposed to answer all my questions, but I guess I was wrong. I decided to look at a few databases, look at different web pages, and figure out what the root of the problem was. I kind of came up with a lack of information, so I decided the most effective source would be to do my own surveys and my own interviews. So I decided to conduct surveys with people from my school and people my age. I pulled 40 people ages 15 to 18, and half of them were male and half of them were female. I'm not going to go into all of the questions I asked and all of the data because that would take forever, but it will be available at the end of the TED Talk. 2 of the most important questions that I asked were, are there enough resources for men's mental health? And do you believe that there's a stigma that men should hide their emotions? For the first question, are there enough resources for men's mental health? 80% of the men polled claimed that there were not, and 75% of the women polled claimed there were not. Almost every single person that claimed that there were enough resources said that there wasn't enough support to access those resources. Now the other question, do men have a stigma that they need to hide their emotions? 100% of the men said yes, and 95% of the women said yes. This should be a problem, and this should be alarming. Now, ever since I was a kid, I kind of grew up, and I was always kind of distraught about men's mental health, and I always never really knew the implications of what it came with. You know, going through middle school, there was a lot of hormones, changes, and everything was different. One of the changes that I started to notice were people weren't the same. One of my friends that used to be a spark of joy seemed to have lost that flame. And I didn't understand why it was happening until it started happening to me. It started to make me feel so alone and like I couldn't talk to anybody. And I had nobody to reach out to. It was really scary. And I was starting to load up all this weight and no way to get it off. Now, where does this come from? I'm sure we've all used the words man up or be a man, but I don't think we really understand the implications of those words. It comes from a long history of our society with the mistreatment of men and the social norm that we should hide our emotions. Men have been put into a position of power, holding high power and holding positions in the government while pushing women to the side. Although the social norm has changed for the better, why has the oppression of men's feelings not changed? Why do we still oppress men's feelings? Now, I personally believe that the reason men are oppressed is because of male dominance and in lack of change through social norms. So now that we know the cause, so what? I think there's an epidemic of suicidal ideation in men, and there's a big crisis that hasn't been talked about enough. There are no ways for men to support themselves, no ways to get support, and I think this is a really big problem. The problem with suicidal ideation is you don't know that somebody's struggling. It's unseen from the outside view, and I think that's honestly the scariest part. Now, I want to create a change, But it's easy to say that, and it's hard to actually do that. I've created a website that lays out all of the suicidal ideation symptoms and ways that you can understand if one of your friends is struggling with suicidal ideation. It also shows ways to help, not just donations, but informing yourself and discovering what the problem is and how to fix the problem. And then it also has a list of all of my data and also an interview so you can add to my data so it'll be more accurate, more effective, and it'll help more people. You can access the website by going to loganzamarin.com or by scanning the QR code. I don't know how to turn this. Well, there's a QR code, but scanning the QR code, and you'll be able to see everything on there. If there's any other way that change can come, I'd love to hear feedback. Change starts now, change starts with us. Thank you.